fascinating question. It's one that we've kind of mentioned a little bit in the past in the context of different stories that we've gone through from Tanakh. Classically, it's the question asked by Esther and Mordechai. Same question by Yael and Sisera and Shimshon in the case of the Philistine women, which is it permissible for a Jew to do something forbidden, essentially, to have relations with a non-Jew? Doesn't matter if it's a man and a woman, or a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman, or a Jewish woman and a non-Jewish man. Are there permitting circumstances for such things? The question really sounds like a simple one, in the sense that the Gemara says there are three things that you can never do in order to save yourself. And we tend to simply understand not to save anyone else either. If somebody were to tell me, in order to be healed, remember there's a famous story in Italy. In order to be healed, you have to kiss the cross, or you have to, get baptized, or holy water or something. What was the Emanuele? Was it? No, Emanuele.
What?
No. The name of the boy that they baptized. His housekeeper baptized him against his will. And John Paul II. Edgardo. Okay, sorry. So as a Jewish baby, he was very sick. He had a really high fever. Everybody said he was going to die. And his housekeeper secretly baptized him, and then miraculously he was saved. She told the families because he was baptized, and the Italians, Yimach Shemam Zichram, good wine, good cheese, good sausage, but Yimach Shemam Zichram, they basically ruled that because he was baptized, he's already Christian. They raised him this way, and the whole scandal. And the last pope, two popes ago, not the Nazi pope, the one before him, John Paul II, beatified the housekeeper who did this. So anyway, long story short, the Gemara says you're not allowed to do any form of avodah zarah in order to save yourself. Meaning, pikuach nefesh, saving a life, as great a priority as it is, does not trump the interdiction of idolatry. So you can't do anything explicitly idolatrous. Actually, the Gemara says not even accessories of idolatry. So it's not that I worship or I bow down to or kiss a cross or something, but someone sprinkles on me holy water, you could say, "Oh, sprinkle holy water, it's a bath, it's a shower." It's not exactly worshiping, so to speak, by doing this, but what you're doing is you're expressing your belief, your faith that this has some kind of healing power, and that it's a power outside of God. So this is forbidden. You cannot save yourself by killing someone else. And so in the unfortunate event that someone puts a gun to my head and says, either you kill him or I'll kill you, you're tempted to do some accounting, but at the end of the day, the Gemara says that your life your blood is not redder than his. How do you get to play God in a situation like this?
But you can kill the guy with the gun, though.
You should. Yes. That's a whole separate halakha. Someone attacks you, you definitely have not just a right, but a responsibility to attack your attacker.
Yes, some people says, "Oh no, you can't do that. You need to forgive." Mostly, like Christians, they will always say like this, "Oh no, turn the other cheek." I said, "But no, Torah says if they're attacking you, you should defend yourself."
I just thought about this in YU today to my students in the morning. This is from a Christian culture that has killed more people. I mean, European culture in general, but Christian culture in particular has killed hundreds of millions of people. So we should talk about this at some point. There's a fascinating perspective of Ashkenazi had on this, on how Christianity became what it is, despite the fact that the Europeans seem opposed to this. And by the way, how the Arabs, generally hospitable, warm, welcoming people, became so violent and so fanatic. It's not really in their nature. They imported that, but it is what it is. They still kill people. Gotta be careful. So the deal with idolatry is that I can't use idolatry to save myself or to save anyone else. I'm not allowed to kill anyone to save myself or anyone else unless this person is attacking me. And our halachic explanation of the concept is that someone who attacks you has basically forfeited his or her own life. So let's say that psycho British guy from Daesh, ISIS, comes and tells me he wants to cut off my head. Say, Mehila, Mr. Psycho British guy, I have to kill you now. Even if he were Jewish, he were an apostate. You read there's a girl from France who converted to Islam.
Yeah.
There was a guy from France who actually died last week from France.
Jewish guy who went to fight with them.
We went to fight with ISIS, and he actually died last week from an American missile.
American missile. Baruch HaMakom Sheharamu. No, the Gemara's expression on this: blessed is the God who killed him. We don't need people like this. Yeah. Let him not come back. We don't need this guy. Seder. So you cannot kill someone unless someone is threatening you with death for whatever reason. Then you can. And then the other one of the supposed big three would be sexual relations. So if someone were to say, "I hate you and I want to kill you," but you're kind of cute, maybe we can figure something out. Maybe we can negotiate something. It doesn't work that way. So It doesn't matter if it's a man, a woman, an animal. There's no combination or permutation of circumstances that would permit anything that's sexually forbidden. And once again, the Gemara says, not only this, even accessories, even things that are not necessarily sexual relations, but close enough or bizarre. An example given by the Rambam would be if someone were to tell a man to wear woman's clothing, woman to wear man's clothing, we would say no. We would say go to the East Village, but no, we don't. Here on the Upper West Side, we don't hold this way. So then the question becomes a little bit more difficult. Why? Because of Shlomo Aylash. Shlomo reads the Tanakh. He learns it religiously. And he reads with the perspective of Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam that we mentioned, Sefer Maspikar of the Hashem, and he says, listen, Rabbi, you don't mean to tell me that Esther didn't know this halakha? We don't have a whole book named after her. If what she did was wrong, it was illicit, it was a transgression of the Torah's interdiction of having relations with a non-Jew. For that matter, she was married. It makes it even more complicated. And what is the deal with Yael, and what's the deal with Shimshon? All three of whom, basically, it appears, righteous though they were, and all three of them, it seems like in the historical retrospective, we condone to a greater or lesser extent what it was that they did. But how can this be? Lots of background concepts here. One is that we're very careful in Judaism about what's called a mitzvah haba ba'avira. If you're familiar with this concept. It's possible that sometimes you want to do a mitzvah, but you do it, or along the way you commit an avira. A good example of this would be, I steal money from Yohan Maleh, and I give it to Judy Amar. Why? Because I'm a nice guy. This is what nice people do. So yes, it's true the money was stolen, but what you don't know won't hurt you. So a little bit of the Robin Hood concept, right? We call this socialism. You take away someone's money and give it to somebody else. That makes you a tzaddik, right? So I worked hard. You took my money, gave it to him, and then why? What did he do? By not having a job, he earns money that I lose by working. So, a mitzvah ba'avira, if you want to observe a mitzvah, and in the process, or as part of this process, you violate an avira, not only, generally speaking, not only do you not get reward for the mitzvah, you get punished for the avira. Classic example, this Rabbi Ovadia Baratanura, happened to be Italian. He writes that give credit where it's due. Rabbi Ovadia writes a beautiful perush on the Mishnah. Really, it's delicious because it's so short, so sweet, and so to the point. So Rabbi Ovadia Baratanura writes that the very first Mishnah, Masechet Shabbat, comes to teach us this concept. How is this? The Mishnah says, there are two ways, really two scenarios that you can break down into four of how one transgresses, violates the grave interdiction of carrying something on Shabbat. It's asur to carry things on Shabbat. If there's an eruv, discussion about what the eruv is and how it's supposed to be, but assuming there's no eruv, it's a horrible violation, one of the 39 melachot, in fact. One of the 39 forms of forbidden activity or work that would constitute a violation, a transgression of the Shabbat. And it's the very first chapter of Masechet Shabbat. And how does it start? It starts simple. If the poor man is standing outside and the Baal Habayit, the homeowner, is standing on the inside, and the poor man sticks his hand into the house and he's holding some kind of a basket or something, and the wealthier guy, or the homeowner, let's not call him wealthy, the homeowner, he has a home, he puts money into the basket, and the poor guy then takes the money out of the house and into Reshut HaRabim, into the public domain. The poor guy has now violated an Isur, he's violated Shabbat. And what happens if the wealthy guy, or the homeowner, doesn't have to be wealthy to give tzedakah, he takes money or coins, and he puts the money, he takes it out of his house, he crosses the threshold of his door, and he puts it inside the basket of the poor man. So he picked up the money from one domain, put it in the public domain, and all of a sudden he's transgressed, he's violated Shabbat. So Rav Adim Baratanura says right away, what a bizarre example. Why don't you just say, I took something out of my house and went outside, or I found something outside and brought it in, right? Think, simple, straight, Italian. Why does it have to be so complicated with a homeowner and the poor guy and the tzedakah? So he says, very simple, because Chazal, they like to teach things in more ways than one. You can learn more than one halakha from this Mishnah. And he says, one of the classic examples is this Mishnah, which comes to teach you that even though the homeowner gave tzedakah, not only does he not get credit for the tzedakah that he gave, he'll actually be prosecuted for violating the Shabbat. So isn't tzedakah a nice thing? Isn't it great? And this example, no offense, he's giving his own money. It's not socialism. He took money out of his pocket, and he's handing it to somebody else who needs it. And here, the Mishnah tells you, this is forbidden. This is a transgression of the Shabbat. So even if I thought...
Not because of the transportation. I mean, it won't be because of the tiltul. It's because of it's Shabbat. How can we pay? How can we take money?
So this is an interesting question. Money on Shabbat is muqtzeh. Muqtzeh is midrabanan. Muqtzeh is a rabbinic concept. It's not biblical. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai didn't hold from it. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi didn't hold like him. Muqtzeh basically means there's no biblical interdiction to touch your phone on Shabbat. If there are certain things that we don't touch, it's because we take a precaution so as not to violate Shabbat. So if I pick up a cigarette, I'll get tempted and I'll go light it. So we'll say the cigarette is muqtzeh on Shabbat. Or there are certain things that are very valuable or expensive that we're afraid you might use or violate Shabbat in order to protect them. A knife of shechita, good example. I can use any knife in my house, but the knife of shechita, you have to be so careful with it. You have to really keep it straight and smooth and polished. So don't even bother touching it, because if something happens to it, you'll be tempted to fix it right away, and that's a sword of Shabbat.
So in theory, touching money itself is not...
Is not a biblical interdiction. But transporting anything, moving anything from one domain to the other, that's the really big deal. The Rav Baruch Torah says, the Mishnah comes to teach you, it's a beautiful Mishnah, teach you two things. First of all, you can't give tzedakah even on Shabbat. Second of all, you could actually be guilty and have violated a prosecutable offense by giving tzedakah on Shabbat, which, as nice an idea as it is, doesn't necessarily work. Why do I mention this? Because if I thought, I know it's forbidden to have sexual relations with a non-Jewish girl, but I see a mitzvah happening here. Like, not only can this lead to something, good and positive, this is a mitzvah. This is my godly divine duty. I'd be derelict in my responsibilities if I were to let this opportunity go by. So the answer is no. A polite no. Thank you, that's very cute of you, but no. You cannot expect to gain a mitzvah, to achieve something positive by doing something negative. Or, put otherwise, the ends don't necessarily justify the means. Machiavelli sounds Italian. I don't know. Anyway, Manuel is having a tough night because David's not here. He's in Milano for 3 days on business. So this is an interesting question. Wait a second, because here Andrea is already turning her nose up at me and saying, Rabbi, no offense, didn't we, going back once again to Esther, isn't this the book that proves that what you're saying is not true? What was exceptional or unique, or perhaps even, we'll call them potentially mitigating circumstances, that makes Esther's choice of actions, if we can call it that, not only not an avirah, but potentially even a mitzvah. Right? Again, if what I said was true, that we do a mitzvah and it comes into being by way of an avirah, it originates from an avirah, this should be negative, it should be forbidden, it should be asur, haram.
So the question is, I guess, where do we put the difference between saving yourself and saving other people, a bunch of people, the entire nation? It's like, where is the limit?
So one of the potential angles for an answer would be this. In the example of, let's see, Shimshon HaGibor, if we're going to take the individual versus the plurality, Shimshon HaGibor, we're told, and this was the prophecy that was given to his mother before she conceived, he told her, he's the one who's going to begin to save the Jews from the Philistines. So, okay, you had a great idea, Uriel, don't get me wrong. Relations with one girl to save one guy is not necessarily such a good thing. Save an entire nation, this becomes a mitzvah. It's got a higher level of priority, a higher level of importance. You're going to save the lives, not of one individual, not even of yourself. You're doing this to save a group. We'll talk about that. Some fascinating questions that came up on this topic. Unfortunately, some of them from around the period of the Holocaust, but these things did come up. So maybe there's a difference between doing this to save myself and doing this to save maybe a large group. I don't know. But in the examples that we have, the entire Jewish nation. Yael, by killing Sisera, effectively put an end to the Assyrian invasion of Israel, in which case she probably saved the entire nation. In fact, she saved the Jewish nation, saved the nations that were living in Israel at the time too. So what she did was a mitzvah on a national scale. Shimshon, whose job was to save the Jews from their number one enemy, the Palestinians, was basically doing what Hashem brought him to this world in order to do. It's bizarre because he seems to have gotten punished, but at the end of the day, once again, to go back to your point, if Hashem answered his prayer, it has to be because there was something to what he requested, and he hadn't completely defiled himself. In the case of Esther, she saved the entire Jewish nation. We have a whole holiday named after, we have a book named after her, a whole holiday that we celebrate this particular victory. Then the question becomes, okay, I hear what you're saying, the difference between the individual and the entire Jewish nation, or let's say even the majority of the Jewish nation. If that's the case, what's the status of the act itself? In other words, put a little bit more poignantly, a normal happy, healthy, married Jewish woman who has relations with someone else, not by accident or by force, would be no longer permitted to her husband if this was the case. This is adultery. So, does this diminish the punishment, mitigate the the negative outcome? In other words, would Esther or should Esther have been permitted to Mordechai even after she had done what she did because it was such a great mitzvah? If she was doing this to save herself, I would say, you know what, not such a good idea. She's doing it to save the entire Jewish nation. Then, if that's the case, maybe we can exempt her from what's otherwise the undesirable outcome of adultery, which would be that she's no longer permitted to her husband Mordechai and have to divorce. And we find this is not the case. She's not exempted from it. In fact, we learn this from the pasuk where she tells Mordechai, rebukes her for, listen, you didn't find out about this decree against your nation. Now you know, I brought it to your attention. He's standing outside in the king's courtyard. He's dressed in a sack and he's got ashes all over his head. He's mourning because the Jewish nation is about to be annihilated. And by the time she finds out about it, she's horrified and she sends Hatach to go tell him, please dress decently. You can't appear in the king's courtyard and look like this. You can't stand outside the palace looking so disheveled. And Mordechai's response is, don't imagine to yourself that you can hide inside the king's palace when your house, the house of your father, is going to be destroyed. Your whole nation is going to be erased. So she says, okay, no problem. Here's what I suggest. Fast for 72 consecutive hours, days and nights. I and my maidservants are going to do the same. Apparently they were Jewish. And I'm going to present myself to Ahasuerus. Incidentally, we learned from here that perhaps we could have said, this is one of the angles we'll take, that maybe up until now it wasn't necessarily so voluntary on her part. This particular time it definitely was. And how do we know? Because she says, B'chasher avati, avati. And if I'm lost, I'm lost. So what was she saying? She wasn't being poetic. The Gemara says, what she was basically saying was just like I was lost from my husband, meaning I was taken by force to be the queen for this psychopath of a king. So too I'm going to be lost from him forever, in the sense that I can't go back to him even after this guy dies or lets me go. Because this time I will be the one who had initiated this kind of contact. So she knows ahead of time that this is probably going to be the consequence, and she knows not that there's no moral justification for what she's about to do, but she's not exempt from the outcome. So even though it's a super mitzvah, it's a mega mitzvah, save the entire nation, nonetheless, it doesn't change the consequences of her actions in the sense that the relationship was illicit. At the end of the day, many good things came of it, and then one tragically unfortunate one.
But Mordechai was a Kohen, right?
No.
No?
Maybe he was from Shevet Yehuda, maybe from Shevet Binyamin. He's referred to as Ish Yehudi, Ish Yemini, Mordechai HaYehudi. So Ish Yemini sounds like he's from Shevet Binyamin. And when he's referred to as Mordechai HaYehudi, today we use the term Jew, which is a contraction of Judean, like someone from the region of Israel that was given to the tribe of Yehuda. Right? Today we call this Judea and Samaria, as if to say the Jews don't belong there because there are Arabs living there. No, these are actually, not only are these Jewish parts of the country, this is where so many of the tzaddikim are buried. This is, the heart of Jewish history is right there. Naturally, we have a strong claim to the country, and the Arabs live where we should be living. So, Judea was you're familiar with the story of the 10 lost tribes?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard of this? We used to have 12 tribes. The Kohanim and the Leviim don't count. I mean, they count and they don't count. They don't have land in Israel. But excluding them from the equation, because we have Kohanim and Leviim today, all of the other 10 tribes. So this is Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Gad, Asher, Dan, Naphtali, Menashe, Ephraim, and Binyamin. So Binyamin and Yehuda are the only two that survived the first exile. Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. Everybody goes out into exile. The only two tribes that came back for the second Bet HaMikdash are Binyamin and Yehuda. Binyamin, which is to the north of Yerushalayim, meaning the border runs right through Yerushalayim, east-west. Just to the north is Binyamin, just to the south is Yehuda. The Judean desert, the beginning of the Negev is in Yehuda. And that's it. We don't have anyone else in the Jewish nation alive today who can legitimately claim to be from another tribe. We just don't know where they are. They were assimilated and pretty much lost. So you have groups, I think, in
India.
B'nai Menashe.
Nepal, yeah,
B'nai Menashe.
India. B'nai Menashe claim to be descendant of Menashe. The Ethiopians claim to be descendant of Shevet Dan, but they left before the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. I mean, that was a long while back. So he's referred to. So today we use the term Jew, like Judean, to refer to everybody who is of what we call Jewish Israelite descent. But the reality is that we say it because probably most of us are descended from Shevet Yehuda because we only have two tribes that we can identify with. And in fact, there is some degree of historic support for this, that the Sephardim are probably most closely related to Shevet Yehuda, and Ashkenazim are probably most closely related to Shevet Binyamin. The Ashkenazim didn't come back for a second Beit HaMikdash. Most of them. They were already in Germany and stayed there. So, or France. So, at any rate, this becomes a very interesting question. So, first of all, we don't see any diminution of the consequence of, not being able to go back to her husband. So clearly, even if it is permissible, even if it is a super mega uber mitzvah, it doesn't eliminate that particular consequence. And the question becomes: is this something ideal? Is it something unideal? Is it something that we can reproduce in our time? So the question was actually asked, believe it or not, of the Israeli military rabbinate, of the Rabbinut Tzva'it. Is it possible? I don't think, by the way, the question was asked by an observant woman who was asking if she really should or shouldn't accept a particular mission as a spy, as a secret agent, double agent, whatever. But clearly this happened. We know of quite a handful of stories where this was part of the agency. So Eli Cohen is a good example. He's an Egyptian Jew, came to Israel. He ended up penetrating pretty deep into Syria. He married there and he had, I think, 3 or 4 children, if I'm not mistaken, before they caught on to him as being an Israeli spy. So because he grew up in Egypt, because he grew up speaking Arabic, they couldn't pick up on him. I mean, he pronounced his Jim instead of Gim. There's a different accent in Egypt, but managed to cover that up. He was married. He did have a Jewish wife in Israel, and he did have Jewish children, and then he had Muslim children from an Arab woman. I guess it was just too weird not to be married in Syria at the time. So, it's one of those details that came out. Did he consult a Rav before doing this? I mean, I don't know the extent to which he took these halachic precautions, but the question is this something that we're allowed to even ideally send someone on such a mission? You, sweet Jewish girl who just finished high school, we have a great idea. Why don't you go marry an Arab, one of these ISIS and Daesh guys? Go give us tabs, let us know on his whereabouts, what he's doing, how many heads did he bring home, where did he put them, and So if this is the only way for us to conduct our military business and save the nation, sounds like a great idea. But thousands of girls are doing this, and I'm not a woman, and I don't pretend to be one. What is? There's an appeal to this, like I just don't get it. Because girls are enlisting from thousands already from France, from England, from Morocco, from Tunisia, from Algeria. Really, ladies? Looking for?
They're being sold.
They're being told stories and all, but still, they're cutting people's heads.
No, they're not.
Here's my thing. I digress, but I sometimes allow myself to do this. So I know a woman. She's nice. Call her a nice woman. She's going out with a guy who's nice. He's married, but he's nice. He's not married to her, Andrea, to answer your question. That's not so nice. But the guy, whatever, there was a dispute issue, something like he's hasn't given a get to his wife just yet, claims he's going to. And I've seen so many things. I used to volunteer with Ora. In fact, I have a meeting with them tomorrow or Thursday in some other case. That Ora, the Organization for the Resolution of Magunot, basically they try to resolve situations where the husband want to give a get, and on camera we do it non-violently. So yes, talking about that some other time. These situations come up where there's a woman involved, and she's like seeing this guy who refused to give her. So if she's Jewish, and she eventually wants to marry him, he was a jerk to his first wife. Like, he got into a fight. Why would you go out with a guy? He's got a track record. Like, he's got a history. Somebody who's never married, you don't know. But now he's involved in this dispute, and you're dating, this is a desirable trait in a husband, that he's stubborn and can be a jerk and manipulative and I don't know. So you're going out with a guy, he cuts off heads for a living. Listen, I'm a butcher, who am I to judge? But it's like, I come home sometimes, it's a slaughterhouse this afternoon. Okay, it's work, take a shower and everything's okay. But the guy cuts off human heads for a living. Where's there there's no human maternal instinct? You think of him as a father, take pictures of him with that crazy flag and the decapitated head. You're going to take your kids to the park one day, you're not going to... Kid goes to school, like, what does your Abba do for a living? Cut off the head of little people. I don't see the appeal, like what draws people to this. But apparently it's appealing. So, what do I know? I'd make a lousy woman. So the question's a complicated and difficult one. There are other stories that came up, and very interesting how these opinions, because the Gemara doesn't really give you very clear guidelines on this. There's an incident that was the Shibuti Yaakov was asked this question, I believe it was in Hungary, where a number of Jews were traveling, and they came across a group of bandits. So these bandits basically kill people, take their money, and they take off. Among this entire group of people, there were, single Jewish men, single Jewish women, and there was one married woman. Naturally, it's the married woman who, for whatever reason, circumstances were what they were, and she consults with her husband, and he says to her, maybe there's room to try to negotiate something. And so she says, okay, if you're okay with it, this is what I'll suggest. And she suggests, doing certain favors in order to save the rest of the group, which happens. It happens. So she tells them, listen, leave them alone, let's whatever, and forget about everybody else. And they agree to this. Apparently on that day, that's what they were looking for. So the husband writes this question to Shmuel Yaakov, and he says to him, my wife is Esther Halakhah, is this, we hope it was, we had to make a decision on the spot, people were going to be killed. And so she asked me, and it was with my permission that she did this, and they were going to kill her. Is it enough that she was threatened with death, that it's considered like she was raped, like it was against her will, or is it actually her initiating this and trying to negotiate everyone out of this situation that's partially voluntary in a way? And his response was that absolutely, there's not even a question that this is a tremendous mitzvah that she did. It is stupendous, it is life-saving, everyone owes their lives to her. And unfortunately, you will have to give her a get and, separate, but not because of any wrongdoing on her part, just the natural consequence of what it was that happened. And so this question comes up, is this something that we can permit only on a national scale? And how do we define the national scale? Rabbeinu Tam has an interesting question on this, where he asks about Chanukah. The general rule is that if a miracle happens, there's a tremendous salvation for the Jewish nation. We recite Hallel. We recite Hallel when, the Gemara explains, only when, before we had the state of Israel, before we even moved to biblical Israel, we recited Hallel on leaving Egypt, for example. All the Jews were in Egypt. What do you want to do? So we praise Hashem for freeing us from Egypt on Pesach, on Shavuot, and on Sukkot. Since then, the Jews came to Israel, and we recite Hallel, for example, on Hanukkah too. But what happened Hanukkah? This is Beit Sheni, it's the second Beit HaMikdash. And the story with the second Beit HaMikdash is that, unfortunately, here we go back to these 10 lost tribes. The historians approximate that somewhere between 10 and 20% of the Jewish nation actually returned to Israel for the second Beit HaMikdash. So if we exclude the Temanim, the Ammonites who didn't go back, the Jerba, I believe there's a certain portion of the Tunisian community that didn't go.
Yeah, that's right.
That's correct. The Temanim are the same thing, by the way. If you're not familiar with this fascinating tidbit of history.
Well, the Persian
the Ammonites and the Tunisians both have, as part of their tradition, that they were cursed by Ezra Sofer for not going back to the second Beit HaMikdash. The Temanim, it appears, they have this in writing. The Temanim said that when Ezra told them, he sent emissaries to all four corners of the earth where they knew there were Jews living, and he petitioned them to come back to Israel for the rebuilding of the second Beit HaMikdash. This is divinely inspired. We have permission from the king. So they wrote back that they had consulted with the heads of the community, Roshei HaKehillah, who told them that they advised against it. They didn't think it was going to last. The first one was destroyed, so much the more so this one. So he writes back to them, and this is part of their traditional literature, that Yehi Ratzon Shetiyu Kulchem Rashim. And apparently he wrote it Chaser Aleph, like Rashim Rish Shin Yod Mem. So Rash in Hebrew means poor, and Rosh is head, like the heads of the communities. And so they understood that this was like a backhanded, two-sided curse, that they should all be the heads of their own communities, meaning as small as, how many Temanim were there? 200,000-300,000 tops. Constantly in Machloket, you think of a Temanim was like, oh, it's so pretty, it's like a freezer of Jewish tradition from 3,000 years ago. The reality is that every village had a different custom, different tradition. They pronounced things differently, they got into fights over these things, and they were horribly poor. Really, of all the Jewish communities, they were terribly, terribly poor. And in Jerba, which is a peninsula on or off the coast of Tunisia, the tradition was that they were still living in the cities of Kohanim and cities of Leviim and cities of Leviim. That the Kohanim were okay with it by the time he got in touch with them, and the Leviim were not. They decided they weren't going to go, and so they all died within the year. And since then, the island of Jerba is like 80-90% Kohanim and 10-20% Yisraelim. There are no Leviim in Jerba. If you find someone who's a Levi from Jerba, his family came over there a generation or two ago. So there was a famous sofer from Tunis who actually, his tefillin and mezuzot were very sought after. And so in Jerba, where they were apparently more observant than the rest of mainland Tunisia, they had begged him to come write tefillin and mezuzot for them. And he agreed to go on the condition that he goes for 11 months a year and he spends 1 month on mainland Tunis. So that the curse, he was a Levi. So the curse shouldn't cut his life short. Okay, but that's them testifying about themselves. So the question is asked, if it's a group of Jews, is it something permissible, even though it's not the entire nation? Rabbeinu Tam explains, well, the story of Hanukkah, clearly it's not the majority of the Jewish nation that was living in Israel at the time. By the way, what happened to all these other Jews that didn't come back for the second Beit HaMikdash? The Gemara says in Masechet Megillah, these were the more learned Jews, the ones who apparently were more observant, who had more of a background, yeshiva tradition, etc. They all assimilated and they all died. None of them were left. So who ended up coming to Israel? There's a chapter, the fourth chapter of Masechet Kiddushin is Perek Asar Hasim, the 10 different genealogical groups of Jews that came with Israel back to Israel. It was the freed slaves, and it was the questionable converts, and it was like, it sounds familiar, right? Ethiopians and Russians and different Jewish communities that we weren't in touch with, and go figure. But again, so what happened to the Haredi community? That was like you would think, the bastion of Torah and Mitzvot. They're in Brooklyn, they're having a good time. So, Lakewood, I guess, other places. So at the end of the day, this is history repeating itself. But Rabbeinu Tam says, so no, how can we say Hallel on Chanukah if we don't have the right? Before we came to Israel, you can say Hallel on national miracles. What happens when we come to Israel? You can only recite Hallel, the Gemara is clear about this, we only recite Hallel on miracles of national importance that occur in Israel. And even then there's a discussion, wait a second, maybe if it's only occurs in Israel, it's for the majority of the Jewish nation. So what's the story of Hanukkah? Well, maybe 10, maybe 20% of the Jews are in Israel. Certainly a miracle, there's nobody questions, it's in the Talmud. Masechet Shabbat. So what's the deal with the entire Jewish nation reciting Hallel over a miracle that, in theory anyway, only directly related to or concerned 10-20% of the Jewish nation? Rabbeinu Tam says, easy. Because the miracle happened in Israel, and because it made it possible for the Jews to inhabit Israel and to continue inhabiting Israel, it was something that did involve, if not directly, then somewhat indirectly, all the Jews in the world. So if I was on the sideline, I said, you know what, I'm not so sure about Ezra's Jewish state. I'm going to wait until I see some conclusive evidence. And then you have this massive Greek invasion. It was really probably more Hellenistic Jews than it was actual Greeks. And they bring in their culture, and they bring in their toga, their sports, etc. I always say it's such a scar on the face of the Jews that in modern Israel, you have what's called the Bureau of Misrat Tarbut VaSport. It's like the Bureau of Culture and Sport. I have to say, culture and sport go together. Like, what? There's a Jewish sport. This is part of our culture. Is about sport. I thought we waged this war 2,000 years ago, but no. Apparently, sport is still considered an inextricable part of the culture because the Greeks thought this way. We should too. So that war is not over yet. So the miracle of Hanukkah is when we say Hallel for. Why? We say Hallel because, yes, it happened in Israel. Yes, it only happened to a minority of the Jewish nation, but it happened in such a way that it benefited the Jews of the rest of the world. So the ability of the Jews to live in Israel, or to choose to move to Israel after we defeated the Hellenists, is a miracle that we can recite Hallel for, even if we were living in Chutz La'aretz at the time. And so there are those who wanted to say, listen, when it relates to the military security of the modern Israeli state, even if the majority of the Jews aren't there, and if what Esther did benefited the entire Jewish nation, Yael benefited the entire Jewish nation, Shimshon, one way or the other, benefited the entire Jewish nation, some were were a little bit more flexible in agreeing with the fact that, Israel's military priorities and the ability to have a powerful intelligence branch of the military and to follow people who are potentially dangerous to the entire Jewish nation and to enable the Jews to live in Israel with security might qualify as such. So not everybody agreed to this. The whole dispute, different opinions on the topic, but this is one of the points that Rabbeinu Tam brought before there was a Jewish state. It's one of the points, one of the proofs that some opinions on this topic, on this concept had voiced.
So, good question. Back to the women with the bandits in the forest or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What if the husband on the spot just gives her a get or something? Let's say he's a sofer or he's learned enough to write a get.
This is the conclusion of one of the other opinions on this whole thing. That basically, huh?
They can't get married after anyway.
Okay.
He gives her a get before, so he can remarry after.
No.
I'm not recommending or suggesting here. I'm just laying out the halachic facts.
I'm taking notes.
Yes, I can tell. The reason I gave the disclaimer. A couple is married and they get divorced. What the Torah says is forbidden to do is for her to marry someone else and then marry her first husband. As long as she's not marrying anyone, and if the guy is not Jewish, then by definition, she can't marry him even if she wants to, then this might not necessarily constitute a problematic situation. It would be problematic if the guy, it's problematic in and of itself, but it wouldn't necessarily mean that he couldn't then remarry her after she comes back. And it's true even if the guy was Jewish. Again, halakhically permissible, bad idea. But if a couple is married and they divorce, even if she has a boyfriend afterwards, then she could still theoretically go back to her first husband as long as she hasn't married a Jewish guy in the interim.
And can a man marry a woman divorced, marry a second woman divorced, remarry the first woman?
The restriction is only on his wife. If she were to marry another guy, I mean, the biblical definition of adultery is a married Jewish woman having relations with anybody. It doesn't matter if it's a married man or a single man. It's her status that determines that. So yes, a man doesn't have that restriction. The Torah puts the restriction on a woman. We can only hypothesize as to why. So, at any rate, that's one of the questions was, wait, maybe this is an easy solution, and this is interesting. When the soldiers of David Melech would go out to war, the Gemara says, what would they do? They write their wives Gitin. Why doesn't the Israeli army do this today? Probably for no good reason, but I definitely would suggest it for someone who plans to enlist and expects to be in dangerous places. It's a good idea. In case you ever do get kidnapped, if you like your wife, you probably wouldn't want her to be stuck for the rest of it. Incidentally, this is the definition of aguna. You may or may not be aware of this. Ogen in Hebrew means an anchor, like when you throw an anchor off a ship in order to keep it in its place. An aguna is a woman who doesn't know where her husband is. That's horrible, because women who wish they didn't know where her husband's are. But an aguna means that she's anchored to a bizarre reality, like her husband disappeared, he was on a ship that never came back. We don't know. Maybe he ended up in some foreign country, got stuck there, ran out of money. Maybe he developed a gambling problem. We wouldn't know. So she can't assume that he's alive, and she can't assume that he's dead, because she just doesn't know what the story is. How do you resolve such a situation? Easy. You give her a get before you go on long, dangerous travels, or before you go out to the army. So even if Chas Hashem Gilad Shalit was young, but Ron Arad was an example of an Israeli pilot that, as far as we know, was captured alive by the Iranians. Never heard from him again. A picture resurfaced later of him with a really long beard. They said it was him. Who knows?
And his wife can still not remarry right now?
Well, his wife remarried. I don't think she...
Okay.
She did what she did. Whether or not she consulted with Rabbanim beforehand is an excellent question. That's a whole other scenario. We can talk about that. I have my aunt's brother-in-law was on the Dakar, the Israeli submarine that sank and there was a whole discussion as to whether or not the women who were married to guys on the submarine could in fact remarry or not. Rav Yitzchak Goren ruled that they could, because they found the emergency buoy, the float that they released when there was an emergency. Yeah, sorry. So there was a whole dispute about that, and Rav Yitzchak Goren, who was the chief rabbi at the time, ruled that these women could remarry because the submarine released an emergency buoy, like a float that gives a radio signal, so you know where the submarine went, where it's sank. Yeah, and he said based on this, and he has it's easy to prove this from the Gemara, that if you heard that someone was distressed and you have reason to believe the distress was potentially life-threatening, we rely on this and she can remarry. And he was right. They found the submarine. They found everybody inside dead. So he was right about that. So anyway, but that's the definition of an amunah, is a woman who doesn't know what her husband's story is or where he is. So she's not a widow. She's not divorced. It's a problem. So how do you resolve the problem? Easy. You give her a get before you go. You can make the get. It can't be retroactive. The get can be valid from now on the condition that some future thing happened or not happen.
So you make it conditional?
Yes. Today we don't like to do this, but yes. Well, right. So I can say this is your get. From now, you're divorced from me if I don't come back within 60 days. And the Gemara says there was a famous story of a guy who gave a get like this, and then he came back, whatever, he got stuck, he ran, and he barely missed the shkiyah, the son, and said, that's it. She's divorced, if he wants her back, she can renegotiate the ketubah, she can, rake him over the coals. For him,
well,
are you kidding me? She can put in for 3 times.
Well,
it does, but that's the nature
worst
of life.
comes to worst, it's not a big deal.
Wait, you want her to wait forever, wondering?
No, I'm just saying. The minute he leaves, he left her. She's
well, let's assume,
I won't say said it.
for argument's sake, let's assume that she liked him and she wanted him back. So the get that he gave her is valid. It's not they couldn't remarry. If it was a kohen,
he can remarry. If it's going to
remarry right away.
He'd be up a creek. We don't know. It could be that she just renegotiated the ketubah. She's like, listen, the first time I married you, was before you knew what I was, how capable I was as a mother, as a head of household, Halakhah Spies, etc. Now that you've got experience, I can negotiate a better ketubah. She was within her rights to do it if she wanted to. I mean, no obligation to take it back. Yeah, it sounds like it wouldn't be so romantic, but. What time for romance?
Well, they've said a condition, 60 days. Yeah.
If he said 60 days, it's 60 days. He came back on the night of day 61. He's up a creek. You'll get 2 witnesses. Go slaughter a few goats. And put together a new wedding. So that's one of the discussions. One of the angles of the discussion that's brought up, on the topic is really it would be easier. It's interesting that it seems like if there was a consensus reached. It's that this may not necessarily be a job for an observant Jewish woman, meaning, I have to qualify that. The Gemara says, Masechet Shabbat, the Rambam writes this emphatically. He said that if someone is sick or someone is in a potentially life-threatening situation on Shabbat, not only is it a mitzvah to violate the Shabbat in order to save him or her, but it's a mitzvah for a Rav, for a Talmid Chacham, for a Tzaddik, someone who's observant and someone who's publicly known as observant to get up and violate Shabbat. Why? Because Emmanuel would say, listen, Shabbat is Shabbat. I know that you're dying, but Shabbat's really important. Maybe someone who's not so observant and anyway doesn't care about Shabbat, someone who used to violate Shabbat every week, should be the one who, lights the fire to help keep you warm, or who gets you a blood transfusion, whatever. So he says, no, so people shouldn't come to think that it's something that's b'di'avad, that's like unideal, it's if only the situation were to arise, here's what you do. He said, no, the Rav should be the first one to get up and do it. I'm going to light this match, I'm going to, drive this car, and I'm going to make sure that this happens, so that this individual is saved, because this is Halakhah. So, there's a comment that appears in the Gemara where the Tosafot have a discussion. They say, okay, let's say it's not a function of violating Shabbat. The Gemara asks a question that's not so easily resolved. What if, if I'm working, okay, I'm sitting there, I'm grinding meat, and I hear screams from outside. What happens? Somebody fell into a lake, doesn't know how to swim. Okay, so I'm working. My work is important, but not that important. I'll go save whoever it is that fell into the lake, and I will have achieved my mitzvah for the day. What if I'm learning Torah? The Gemara says, if I'm dealing with Chaya Olam Hazeh, I'm dealing with my mundane, banal, material life in this world, so why should this, my parnasah, why should my work take precedence over someone else's life or death situation? It shouldn't. What if I'm studying Torah? What if I'm learning Torah? I'm dealing with Chaya Olam Haba, I'm dealing with the abstract, with the metaphysical. Do I really have an obligation to put the book down or to save someone? So it sounds like a cute question. The Gemara says, if there's someone else who can do it, let someone else do it. If no one else is going to do it, so you put the book with them. The Tosafot, they write this conclusion, they say, it's great if you never had to be in one of these positions before, because these are tough calls to make. Today, we don't learn Torah with such an appetite that we can say, oh my God, I hope I don't get interrupted. But we learn Torah and we look at the watch. But the reality is, these are difficult situations. Maybe it's true, and it's hard for us to say, maybe it's true that Esther, the whole situation arose, the whole situation took place in order to teach us that this is something that was necessary and even permissible, maybe even commendable under the circumstances, and that she, such a righteous woman who was divinely inspired, incidentally, I think it was the Chatam Sofer, who writes that this is only permissible with divine inspiration or with prophecy. We find by Shimshon, we find by Esther, so who's going to permit from then on? It's like, you're a prophet, God wants you to engage in this relationship. So that was the machloket between Esther and the Chachamim, that she said this book should be canonized because I'm a prophetess, I have Ruach HaKodesh, somewhere in the middle. And the Chachamim ultimately capitulated. They said, you're right, the story is divinely inspired. Otherwise, if she weren't such a righteous woman, it wouldn't have been as big a deal. Once again, going back to Shlomo Ayash and his Tanakh learning habits, if you're learning Tanakh, she's a tzaddiket, then what she did must have been right. You're going to come to this conclusion. She's a tremendous woman, she's tremendously spiritual and calculated. Everything she does in order to find favor in the eyes of Hashem. So clearly, if she was able to do this, it was the right thing to do. Because if it was a woman who wasn't so morally, concerned, then it wouldn't necessarily have taught me this lesson. And perhaps that's why it's there. Or, and this is the classic retort, maybe it's only a woman on the level of Esther who could do such a thing and say this was right or it was permissible or it was mitigated or justified, etc. The same way they say about Pinchas. So Pinchas saw something terrible happen. What did he do? He took a lance and he stabbed them. He killed, Zimri and Cosby. So if Pinchas does it, that means it's okay for everybody to do, or do I have to be Pinchas in order to get away with this? We don't recommend stabbing people. We don't recommend Nizirut. If nothing else you learn tonight, don't be so extreme in either direction. Not really into ISIS, aka Daesh either. Let's, we learn from these stories. They're wonderful things. We hope it never comes to practice, that we need to make these terrible, difficult, and painful decisions. But the literature seems to support the fact that if it's necessary and if the Jewish nation is saved from it, as at least seems to be the case anytime the military in Israel requires such a thing, that at the end of the day it must somehow be permissible, although it's definitely better that if the woman is married, her husband should resolve that first in order to prevent the otherwise potentially unfortunate circumstance. It's a discussion we're not going to get into now, but the fact that there is someone violent or dangerous doesn't mean that offering yourself in such a capacity constitutes rape. That seems to be pretty universally acknowledged that that's not the case. So that's up. See you guys next week. Topics are online.
They are.